Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just 11 p.m. Kyiv time, 5 p.m. New York time, on the 30th of October, 2025, day 1345 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you live from this major European capital, currently under siege. I see that the peeps are coming in. How you doing, Daryl Roberts? Hey, Debbie. Hey, John. Hey, Steve Kennedy. What are you doing, you freak? Hey, Eli. Richard Prexis, Chef Deb, Akron. Anthony Tommy Tom with a new avatar. I did, Bernard. Thank you very much. I had a very, very pleasant day yesterday. Thanks for all the birthday wishes from everybody that came in. I sure did appreciate it. It was a very nice day. I spent the morning with an American who was in town, and then the evening dinner with a friend. Very, very nice. Hey, Courtney Davis. Hey, Guard. Hey, Nicola. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, Feisty. Hey, Nightshade. Thanks for the reminder, pal. We just got one more day of this, right? Today and tomorrow. And then we're back on the normal schedule. New York hasn't done daylight savings time yet, so we're off an hour for everybody around the rest of the world. Oh, it really... daylight savings time every year, right, guys? Okay. It's worse in the spring. In the spring, it's 2 weeks difference. Ugh. So, we kind of got cut off last time because the power went out on us. Oh, shoot. I did not plug in the backup power to the router. All right, well, if the power cuts out, I'll have to plug in the backup power to the router, and I'll be back as quick as I can. So, we did get cut off last time, and there are a couple of things I want to talk about. The first is Lukoil and the divestiture of foreign assets. Now, it appears as though the Russians are playing a shell game. A company called Gunvor, which is owned by a Russian oligarch, is apparently buying all of the Lukoil overseas assets. Now, one can only assume that some kind of a deal is being cut so that those assets are being preserved so that at some future time they can be returned to the Russians. I don't know that to be true. Maybe Gunvor is just taking its shot and it's going to grab everything that it can at the lowest price it can get. And because of its ties to the Kremlin, it's in a position to do that. I don't know. But we shall see. Lukoil is divesting itself of all of its foreign assets. That includes oil fields in Iraq. It includes refineries in the Netherlands, Bulgaria, and Kazakhstan. The Bulgarian and Kazakhstan refineries are of particular interest to the governments in those nations. They provide a significant volume of the country's refined oil products. So neither Bulgaria nor Kazakhstan can let those refineries go dark. They're going to be very interested in the outcome of this deal and how those refineries are going to be managed moving forward. The stock, Lukoil stock, took quite a hit yesterday, boy, losing $5 billion in a day in its market capitalization. The sale will also include 3,500 gas stations in 30 countries that Lukoil currently owns and operates. Of the 230 in the United States, most are franchise owned. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll tell you something. If I was a Lukoil franchisee, When this war started, the first thing I would have done was found another supplier and stopped paying my franchise bill. Maybe took the L off the side and turned myself into Ukoil or some shit. But there is no way I would have kept pouring money into the Russian coffers. No way. These guys produce 2.2 million barrels of oil a day. That's something like 2% of the world's crude oil production, and refine 1.1 million barrels of it. This is the kind of sea change, the kind of tough sanctions on Russia that could affect a change in Kremlin policy, because it will hit the Kremlin pocketbook hard, very, very hard. And that's where we're at with that today. Now, the long-term fallout of this is yet to be determined, but I think clearly this is another coffin nail in the Russian economy. It is not going to be good for them. The last story from the other day that I didn't get a chance to tell you about, Lynx, the German Lynx IFV fighting vehicles will be produced in Ukraine under a co-manufacturing agreement with the German government. Lynx is coming to Ukraine. And so they will export them from here to German customers, and they will provide them to the Ukrainian military as well. And that is a great story. Now, for those of you who are paying attention or who follow me on, Blue Sky, Twitter, X, whatever it is, Threads, and Instagram, you know that last night was one of the top 5 largest drone and missile strikes against Ukraine in the entire 3.5 years of war. The Russians hit the country with 653 drones and 52 missiles, 9 of which were ballistic. Very difficult to intercept, right? Especially now, the Russians have had so much field experience with their ballistic missiles. They are retraining them, reprogramming them for new anti-interception flight paths. So a missile will come in, it'll be following a trajectory, and it will change course at the last minute suddenly to avoid air defense. This is making Russian missile attacks against Ukraine far more devastating, far more effective, and far more deadly. What we saw last night was a concentrated effort to overwhelm air defense with drones and then have these missiles come in and strike civilian infrastructure. Only about a 60% interception rate on the drones last night. 21 of 52 got through and did extensive damage to thermal power plants, gas infrastructure, oil depots, oil pipeline infrastructure, and energy infrastructure on the civilian grid. 30,000 people were left without power overnight last night down in the Odessa region. Russia is intent in its winter campaign to strike energy infrastructure here, drive Ukraine into darkness and into cold, and freeze Ukrainians in their beds. It is October 30th. There is no heat in this apartment. Now, don't feel bad for me, right? I have a nice little apartment. I can keep it warm just by making some soup. And really, that's what I do, right? Nothing like Grandma taught me when the power was out. There was nothing better to do than put a big pot of boiling water on the stove and make some soup from scratch, right? Keep that pot of water boiling all day long. So I have had some fabulous soup this week, let me tell you, and tomorrow I am making a bone broth is what I'm doing. This is what we do. Is Putin not sleeping well? I don't know. Do sociopaths ever sleep poorly? Because that's what he is. It is worth pointing out at this juncture that NBC News got its hands on a U.S. military assessment of the current thinking of the Putin regime. And they shared that, according to NBC News, this week with members of Congress. They quoted this report from U.S. military intelligence. In regard to Putin, he is more determined than ever to carry on the war and prevail on the battlefield. That he has to. He doesn't have a choice. The Russians love a strong man. They hate a loser. The Russian people themselves will tear Vladimir Putin limb from limb if he gives an inch in Ukraine. He has to win it. He has to win it. Hopot asked the question, could the U.S. government take over Lukoil infrastructure? That is the point of the sanctions. If Lukoil does not divest of its American assets before November 21st, the end of the wind down period, the American government will seize their assets, yes. And they will encourage their partners in other parts of the world to seize Lukoil assets in their countries. But it looks like the point is moot, Hopat. It looks like they've got a buyer. The buyer is going to buy it all wholesale at probably pennies on the dollar. And we know we can't trust the buyer. The buyer is a Russian oligarch who left Russia, is doing business outside of Russia as a Dutchman, I think. I think he's Dutch based, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to check that out. Blue light special. You know, it's funny you say that, Little Red. I was going to do a whole video about the Lukoil blue light special, but I think that you have to be of a certain generation to understand that. And I think that this generation coming up doesn't have any clue what a blue light special is. Right? And I don't think the Europeans do either. I don't know. Do you guys know what a blue light special is? Does that ring a bell for anybody? Or is that just American pop culture nonsense? But it is funny you say that. That's exactly what I was going to do. Kmart, Tony. Well, my audience tends to be 55 plus. Yeah, see, the South Africans don't know. I can tell all the Americans over 50, though. Ha! Maybe 45. There was for our European friends and those who don't know what a blue light special is, Kmart, the retailer, the American retailer, before Walmart came along and pummeled them into the ground, they used to do a blue light special. So you'd be in Kmart shopping and you'd hear over the loudspeaker, now in aisle 2, special on eggs, 2 dozen eggs for $3, some shit like that. And you had to go right then to get yours, and then it was over, just like that. So, yeah, you and me both, Little Red. Yeah, no Kmart out your way. Now, this all comes amid mounting paranoia from the Kremlin. You may have seen reports of an armored column entering Moscow and rumors of a coup. This is nonsense. There is no verifiable information of any coups coming to Russia. Okay? So let's not get our hopes up. What this large armored column entering Moscow really was a series of air defense units that had been pulled from oil depots, military industrial complex plants, oil refineries, softer targets around Western Russia that were pulled in specifically to ring the Kremlin in air defenses. This comes on the heels of Zelensky's comments that Bunker Grandpa should prepare to get in his bunker, that the missiles would be flying to the Kremlin. This was, I don't want to call it a threat, but that was what Zelensky intimated the other day. And the Kremlin seems to have responded dramatically, pulling all kinds of air defense assets from soft targets all around Western Russia and pulling them into the Kremlin. Now, look, we've talked about this before. I've said this before. Empires die from the edges inward, right? As resources become more and more rare, they get sucked up by the center of power, which in this case are Moscow and St. Petersburg. And that's where the resources are going. The rest of the country is suffering gas shortages, not in Moscow and Petersburg. In Vladivostok, they had a protest around a new tax on imported cars. The people who organized, and it was a permitted protest, right? It was a legal protest under Russian law. So it had a start time, a stop time, an attendance limit, all that shit. But it was sanctioned. The organizers had a very successful protest 2 weeks ago. They applied for a permit to do it again, and instead, this time, were rejected and told that a pro-Kremlin, pro-tax government paid for protest. I mean, you know, they make fun of the liberals in the United States or the left in the United States. They're always saying that the protesters are paid. And the reason that they take this cynical attitude toward it is because in countries like Russia and North Korea, the protesters are paid members of the party. That's who they are. That cynical attitude that grassroots movements don't exist, that the individual is powerless to make any changes to his society, is nonsense. And it's a lie that the autocrats want you to believe so that you don't try to do anything. If you don't try to do anything, nothing will change, and they will have their way with all of us. And this is what they want. So, as the empire dies, as we're watching in real time, the atrophy, decay, and corruption spread throughout the Russian Federation, sealing off the arteries and capillaries, choking off the lifeblood of what was once the largest nation on earth. We increasingly have reports of government asset seizures. Now, I've reported extensively on the seizures of Western-owned properties inside of Russia, to the tune now of $29 billion worth of companies like Carlsberg Beer, Danone Yogurt, Juniper Electric out of Germany. Germany? I think Germany. Germany or one of the Scandinavian countries. $29 billion, $13 billion of it just this year alone. But look, the whole Russian economy is not a modern economy. It's a pre-modern economy driven by monopolies, driven by single ownership solutions, driven by people who believe that in order for me to win, you must lose. Winner take all, zero-sum strategies, which keeps the population poor and unfortunately centralizes much of what Russia needs right now, which means that when Ukraine does things like burn the Tambov gunpowder factory to the ground, Russia's going to have a hard time replacing that production because they don't have another single facility, anything like it, anywhere in the country. This winner-take-all gangland culture, we are watching the Russians eat themselves. Asset seizures, companies, profitable companies. The CEO is simply being arrested, thrown in jail, and his company is being handed to a friend of Putin's. That's what's happening. We're seeing increased reports of the kidnappings of the wealthy and powerful in Russia and the holding of them for ransom. Infighting between oligarchs is on the rise, as we saw over the Wild Berries retail store, where literally Chechens were shooting people on their way into the office in downtown St. Petersburg. When Putin is gone, the orgy of violence that the Russian Federation, or what's left of it, is likely to descend into will be unlike anything that we have seen in the modern world. And it's coming. It's coming as surely as your next heart attack. Now, the big news on the front, I think, is Prokrovsk and what's happening in the Prokrovsk direction. Everywhere, all up and down a 1,000-kilometer front line, the Ukrainians are holding their own and repelling Russian advances, even in places like Kyiv and Kupiansk. The Russians are not progressing. They took all of 5.5 square kilometers last week. Zelensky is saying that in the Prokrovsk direction, things are difficult, and we're getting all kinds of reports about just how difficult they are. One of the things that's happened in Prokrovsk is that the Russians have fire control over all of the points of ingress and egress. So every road leading into or out of Prokrovsk is now under Russian fire control, with the Ukrainians claiming, and I don't know how such a thing could be, but the Ukrainians are claiming that the Russians have a 10-to-1 drone advantage on the southern Prokrovsk front. 10-to-1. And again, all the roads are covered. You can't get reinforcements in. You can't get wounded out. The civilians are trapped in there, right? About 1,200 civilians. And the worst part, of course, is that the Russians seem intent on murdering every single one of them. We saw the dreadful video of Russians, at least those Russians were in uniform. Russians in uniform gun down 4 civilians and leave a 5th for dead at the railway station in Prokrovsk last week. We also saw on the other side of the coin the incredible bravery of a young Ukrainian man who came along and found that woman shot but alive, and we watched him valiantly try to carry her to safety, not knowing the final outcome, not knowing if around the next corner they met those Russians again and they're both gone, or whether he managed to get her someplace safe and keep her alive. We don't know what happened. The situation in Prokrovsk is difficult, to say the least. Magnus Carlson says, I'm afraid that Prokrovsk is lost. And Magnus, your fear is well justified. It may be. But guys, I want to remind everybody. Oh, and I would also say, Magnus, your thinking is in line with that of most analysts. Most analysts seem to have given up on Prokrovsk at this time. But guys, I want to tell you, over a year ago, I was sitting here saying the same thing. Hey, Sergey, thanks for the birthday wishes. I was sitting here saying the same thing. We all were. Everybody was. We thought for sure by, Christmas, Prokrovsk would be gone. Yet here we are a year later, and they still can't take it. Remember what Putin's deadline was. Can anybody remember? When did Putin first say, I want Prokrovsk by? What was the first deadline that Putin put on Prokrovsk? Does anybody remember? It was after Avdiivka, right? Avdiivka, first deadline that Putin put on Prokrovsk. Does anybody remember? It was after Avdiivka, right? Avdiivka fell in February of 2024. 19 months ago, Avdiivka fell. And then they moved on to Prokrovsk. And Putin said, I want Prokrovsk by August 31st, 2024. Right? Then it was August 31st, 2025. Now it's November 15th, 2025. Oh, Leo Ring. There's Leo Ring. It's a Pyrrhic victory. Everybody thank Leo Ring. He's the sponsor of tonight's live. Thanks, Leo. Appreciate it. Appreciate the birthday wishes, man. So now the deadline is November 15th. And all the analysts and Magnus are all saying the same thing. We think Prokrovsk is lost. However, you guys know well, maybe you don't know him, but you've heard me quote General Chip Chapman more than once, right? Chip Chapman, formerly from the Royal United Services Institute in London, former chemical weapons and nuclear weapons expert for the Royal Army. No, that's not what they're called, but for the British Army, right? This guy said in an interview with Times Radio yesterday, I had to play it back 3 times to make sure that I heard him say what I thought I heard him say. Chip Chapman says Putin wants the whole Donbass, right? Before the first of the year. Chapman says he's never going to get that. Chapman says he wants Prokrovsk by November 15th. I don't think he'll get Prokrovsk this year. So, look, the fog of war is thick over the Russians. It's a tug of war. The Russians, it's a tug of war. And I don't know that anybody knows for sure what's going to happen. But let's just ask the question. What does it mean if Prokrovsk or when Prokrovsk falls? It means very little. It means as little as the fall of Avdiivka. It means as little as the fall of Bakhmut. In fact, it will put the Ukrainians in a better defensive position because what Prokrovsk has done is given them time to build defensive emplacements. Am I lagging? How's it coming through, guys? Valley Guy, that's exactly right. What have we been doing this whole war? Underestimating the Ukrainians. Underestimating the Ukrainians. And we do that at our own risk. So, guys, there's different... It's tough, man. The Russians hit a major communications center here 2 weeks ago. The internet has been unstable since then. I'm going to encourage people, if you're still lagging, maybe try to jump out and jump back in again. Maybe try to reconnect. That's the best I can do because most people are saying it's okay. Have I seen the orcs swimming after the dam burst? Sure, there's lots of video online of their MRAP submerged and them having... And I'll tell you, that is not an enviable situation. What is 42 degrees into the water in? That is not... That strike on that dam at that time was one of the more inspired uses of terrain in this war. And I think the Ukrainians should be applauded for the controlled use of HIMARS munitions to strike just the tippy top of that dam so that the dam didn't fully collapse and only about 2 meters of water were taken out of the reservoir. Just enough that was needed to flood the Russian positions, cut off their supply lines, isolate the troops, and send them into chaos. Perfect. If there is such a thing as a perfect operation. I would say that that's it. Now, coming back to Prokrovsk, not only do we have the Russians summarily executing civilians in the streets, but Russian troops are also reported to be appearing in civilian clothes and indiscriminately targeting civilians in the city, dressed as civilians. Now, again, there are only about 1,200 people left there out of a city that I think at one time was over 100,000 before the war. And was, sadly, one of the great triumphs of the war, because everybody fled from the Russians from there. Then the front stabilized and everybody went home. And then they all had to flee again. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. Regarding the GRU prisoners taken in Prokrovsk, yes. If I'm not mistaken, it was 19. Now, if you don't know the GRU is like a secret Russian intelligence service. Not secret, but like a secret service, right? Like a CIA, if you will. Although nothing is a one-to-one match in comparisons between the U.S. and Russia. But the GRU are some of the toughest guys in comparisons between the U.S. and Russia. But the GRU are some of the toughest guys around. And the fact that they were using those military intelligence assets to get into the city at all says that the Russians are facing real challenges in Prokrovsk. So yes, 19 members of the GRU, the Russian intelligence service, were taken prisoner as part of infiltration group captures in southwest Prokrovsk just this week. Everybody knows that north of Prokrovsk, the Ukrainians had surrounded 3 separate groups of Russians, potentially a couple thousand Russians in those cauldrons. At least 50 prisoners were taken last week when one of the cauldrons was closed, and finally everybody was eliminated or taken prisoner. There are 2 more cauldrons with at least a couple thousand Russians trapped in them in all likelihood. And yet it is Putin who pulls this psyop bullshit, inviting reporters, including Ukrainian reporters, saying that he will open a humanitarian corridor for 5 or 6 hours and let them go in and talk to surrounded Ukrainian soldiers. Now, given that there are no surrounded Ukrainian soldiers, this is nonsense of the first order. I mean, yes, it's a difficult situation, but the Russians aren't the ones in a cauldron. The Ukrainians aren't the ones in cauldrons being hunted down and eliminated systematically by the enemy. It's the Russians that are in cauldrons. So I don't know what the fuck Putin is talking about. It is the exact opposite of what is actually happening. And of course, we've come to expect that sort of thing from the Kremlin. Now, we are seeing right now happening in Prokrovsk the largest artillery barrages of the war in that area. The Russians are just systematically destroying what's left of the city that's within artillery range, block by block, with a particular focus on the high-rise buildings that Ukrainian drone operators use as observation points, launch points, and triangulation points to determine range for artillery strikes. 200 Russian soldiers are inside Prokrovsk proper, around the railway area. They've come in small infiltration groups of 2 and 3. They hide in the basements of rubble until other soldiers can join them. When they get 10, 20, 30 guys together, they start roaming the streets and murdering anyone they can, sometimes in civilian clothing. In response to the push on Prokrovsk, Russian drone operators are not slacking. We have seen in the last week them destroy 2 TOS-1A thermobaric weapons, a BM-27 Uragan MLS launcher, a BM-21 Grad launcher, artillery destroyed, get this, an ML-20 howitzer. That's an interwar weapon. That's a pre-World War II artillery gun that the Russians dragged out of some museum in order to actually use it on the field. We've seen precision airstrikes, 3 GBU-39 glide bombs hit 3 Russian artillery batteries and destroyed them all. As bad as it is, as intense as the fighting is, as uncertain as the future is around Prokrovsk, it is clear that Prokrovsk still stands, that the Ukrainians are still doing everything to bleed the Russians of everything they can before they give up an inch. It is costing the Russians dearly. And it's my opinion that the Russian obsession with Prokrovsk will be its undoing. Remember what happened after? Doesn't this all sound like Bakhmut? Isn't it all very reminiscent of Bakhmut and what happened in Bakhmut? And then, guys, ask yourself, what happened after Bakhmut? What happened after the Pyrrhic victory, right? Do we know this term Pyrrhic? It means to win something, but it cost you so much you might as well have lost, right? That's a Pyrrhic victory. Thanks, June. That's very thoughtful of you. That's a Pyrrhic victory. It just cost you so much. What's the point? And that's what happened in Bakhmut, right? Like 30,000 Russian Wagnerites dead. The city reduced to absolute rubble, nothing to loot, nothing to gain, nothing. Just a mouthful of ashes and a blood-stained uniform from crawling over the bodies of your own compatriots. That's what Bakhmut was. And what did it lead to? It led to the Wagner Rebellion. It led to Yevgeny Prigozhin driving his people just 100 miles from Moscow. And, of course, finally, in the end, to his own demise and the demise of all of Wagner. So that today there is no Wagner. And it's not a strategic advantage, Valley Guy. Taking Prokrovsk is not going to change the war. By holding Prokrovsk this long, the Ukrainians have bought themselves time to build all those defensive lines 20 miles west of Prokrovsk. You got tank traps, concertina wire west of Prokrovsk. You got tank traps, concertina wire, fortified emplacements. It's not going to be easy to move forward from here, and they can't even get there. I'm not at all worried about the collapse of Ukrainian lines. I'm not at all worried about that. The Russians should be worried about the collapse of their lines. Did the Russians send some Wagner to Venezuela? Interesting. I wonder where they pulled them from. It's pointless to try to talk to this administration. This administration is not going to do anything for Ukraine. There's no talking to these people. They literally just tore down half the White House and do not give a shit that nobody appreciates it. Ukraine is playing the long game. You know, we keep saying that when we think about this war, you notice how the enemy, in their comments, they're always talking about land, moving forward, taking land. Now look, the Russians have barely taken any land in 24 months. Legitimately, they are moving forward. But it's less than a snail's pace. Literally, a snail would be in Poland by now. And right, so it's a joke. It's a joke. They're moving forward very slowly. And the enemy always talks as if the only thing that matters is the frontline battle. That is not what matters. What matters are alliances and economies and industrial scale of production and innovation and the ability to fight an asymmetric war. And right now, what we're seeing is Ukraine winning the deep battle. There were so many hits against Russian energy infrastructure, oil depots in just the last couple days. Here's the list, right? In the Donbass, we saw 2 Russian radars and 2 MLRS systems destroyed. Down in Crimea, we saw a $20 million Pantsir air defense, along with 2 radar stations destroyed. In Crimea, we saw the air defense, along with 2 radar stations destroyed. In Crimea, we saw the Eitan oil depot at oil refineries. The NS oil refinery erupted in a massive blaze overnight, as well as in Ulyansk. Air traffic was disrupted from Moscow to the North Caucasus as that came under attack. We saw in Stavropol, a chemical plant owned by Luke Oil is burning. All the way out in Bashkortostan, an underground gas storage facility is burning, along with the Mariel refinery, 1,000 kilometers, 600 miles from the Ukrainian border. Not to mention chaos in Moscow with drones in the air. Russia is barely holding its own on the battlefield, and it's cost them 1.2 million men. Ukraine is systematically dismantling the Russian economy by dismantling the means of energy production and tax the Russian economy by dismantling the means of energy production and tax revenue inside Russia. Some interesting video got released today of that crane down in Sevastopol rolling over and sinking. Apparently, because the crane is being built, right? Apparently, the crane was testing its lifting capacity and somebody forgot to fill the ballast. And so when it tried to lift the heavy object, the thing just fell over and sank. Fill the ballast. And so when it tried to lift the heavy object, the thing just fell over and sank. At least that's the official story, and there is an investigation underway. Finally, the Kyiv Independent is reporting that Ukraine has eliminated a Bucha war criminal, Lieutenant Colonel Veniamin Mezharin, when his car exploded in the Kemerovo Oblast on October 25th. According to the main military Ukraine, who claimed responsibility for the execution of this genocidist in Bucha as part of his duties with the National Guard Amulet Unit in Kyiv Oblast in spring of 20. As part of his duties with the National Guard Amulet Unit in Kyiv Oblast in spring of 2022. Budanov is quoted, "The only deserved punishment for such can be their elimination. I will put it into action. Warning all Russian, the only deserved punishment for such can be their elimination. I will put it into action. Warning all Russian war criminals everywhere that the acts of violence against the Ukrainian people will be met with the righteous retribution of the Ukraine." Weibo, don't apply modern safety measures to the Russians. Come on, you know better than that. Don't be silly. Okay, so big thanks to Leo Ring, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Leo. Really appreciate you. We have a sponsor for tomorrow and for Monday. So if anybody wants to sponsor a live next week after Tuesday, PayPal's in the description. Rent is due this week, so help me out. I'm doing good though. I have the rent, so I could use some more grocery money, but other than that, I'm okay. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and of course to the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk. Thank you guys. Okay, so questions. We got 10 minutes left. Questions, comments, points of observation, personal need. Anything from anybody? Hey, Ben Tilly. How you doing? Night, Nightshade. Thank you, Mike Kelly. Night, Nightshade. Thank you, Mike Kelly. Thank you, Feisty. Oh, it's been chilly and rainy here. I didn't do anything for my birthday, really. I made... A friend of mine was over for brunch. I made some French toast, which I haven't made the whole time I've been in town here. And I made it because Becca and Lori when they were in town, brought me maple syrup. Good maple syrup. And so we had French toast and bacon, because I found a grocery store with some American bacon. Oh, and that was really nice. And then we had French toast and bacon, because I found a grocery store with some American bacon. Oh, and that was really nice. And then I had another friend over for dinner last night. It was a very, very pleasant day. Right now, Hope Hot, I am working on a bone broth, a beef bone broth. So in the oven at 160 right now, I'm roasting some shank bones in some tomato sauce and onions. And they'll cook for about 2 hours or so. And then tomorrow, I will put them in a pot with some other stuff, and they'll need to cook down for about 14 hours. George is cooking. Nice. Hey, Norbert. It was Canadian maple syrup. Yes, it was. The good stuff. Hey, Marius. Hey, Flying. That was very nice of you, Flying Sunbeams, by the way, to thank the video sponsor on that video. That was very thoughtful. I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of the followers. It's very nice. Yeah, well, Feisty, I want to make a beef bourguignon, and I need a good beef broth for that. So I'm starting with the broth. This is not a cooking channel. Why are we talking about this? All right. Oh, yeah, Canadian maple syrup will change your life. There's no two ways about it. You can get Canadian maple syrup here. It does cost an arm and a leg. It's 1,000 hryvnias for a pint. That's about $25, Nicola. So, needless to say, I do not buy it. Right, Sarah, that's right. Good broth takes a while. It takes time. You gotta take your time. Slow and steady wins that race. Yeah, it's a real luxury good, Nicola. And I don't understand why maple trees grow here like anything. Just nobody's doing that here. It's interesting. It'd be nice to find, a couple acres with a bunch of maple trees on them out of the city. Maybe start making maple syrup. You could make money here. That's for sure. You could make money here. All right, kids. Listen. Listen. I've made maple syrup. It's a lot of work. It's only 12 weeks a year, but it's a lot of work in those 12 weeks. It's a lot of work. Um, Thanks, Bernard. Oh, birch syrup is great, right? To make birch beer, any number of products. And there's a lot of birch here, Bernard. So that does make sense to me. Or Dusty, that does make sense to me. Absolutely, it does. Oh, Dusty, I forgot. I will get in touch with Becca about the thing. Thank you. I'll take care of that. Thank you very much. I'll take care of that. Thank you very much. Where's here, Valley Guy? I don't know where here is. I used to have a small farm, and we had about 2 acres of sugar maples on the property that we tapped with hoses and ran it all to a central location where we tapped with hoses and ran it all to a central location where we could then pull it off a sugar house. I did enjoy my birthday. I had a very nice birthday. Okay. Well, guys, listen, I tell you what, it's just about top of the hour. So let me again thank Leo Ring, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Let me please thank Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and of course, the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk. Thank you all so much for dropping by, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Take care. Good night, Ted. Night, Nicola. Night, Feisty.